Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight I'm going to wrap up our primary focus on the Golden Dawn and its foundation. I will probably set aside a playlist just about the Golden Dawn and its primary members. There are other people that I'm going to talk about later that had either connections to or direct workings within the lodge, and I'll add those guys as well to the playlist. But tonight we're going to kind of wrap things up. So, I've introduced you to the founders of the Golden Dawn and those who continued the original line of this mystic lodge. But I haven't told you what the lodge is, or what it's about, or what you can learn there, or any of the rest of that. So we're going to go through that now. I will say this, I'm going to kind of go over things in a simple form. There is so much here. I mean, this book right here, this is just rituals and basic of the essays. And so there's a lot here. But we'll go over the basics of it just so that you can kind of make your own decisions on what it is, if it's something you're interested in or not. Originally, the lodge was called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I refer to it as just the Golden Dawn because this is the true vein. It was originally founded in 1887 by the three founders, William Westcott, William Woodman, and Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers. Legend goes that the founding documents were called the Cipher Manuscripts, and these manuscripts detailed an elaborate set of grades and rituals to advance the practitioner through Zealotr was the second one, basically from a novice who knows nothing into adepthood. Through these grades, one would learn mystic or hermetic Kabbalah, which is a very intensive practice on its own, and that is where the Garden of Pomegranates, the book linked in the description, really comes in handy if you're wanting to get into this. And I put a small list of the beginning books down there in the description, because if you're going to do this, the main black book is your first priority, but the rest of them tie in, and I'll get to that. Sorry. But that's the primary focus, is the Kabbalah. But with the Kabbalah, you're going to learn astrology, which is the part that I'm not good at, tarot, but you're not just learning how to use the tarot as a oracle to read futures or read energy or anything like that. The tarot has extremely deep roots and history, and within the practice of the Golden Dawn, you will learn how to meditate, how the tarot ties to the tree of life, how the tarot can actually show you your life. That's one of the first places I came to the understanding of the major arcana being a life's journey from the Fool to the end. And so you're going to learn a lot about that in depth. It's not going to be just a quick little glance. It's like you have to do work to understand what it is you're dealing with. Geomancy, not a big fan of for me, but and then you also will learn a lot about alchemy, but you're learning it in the basic concept of philosophy and spirituality. Although when you start playing with alchemy, it translates into the physical world quite easily. And this is the beginning. This is what you start with. From there, you would add knowledge of the elemental and spiritual world. This is your first order work. So that's all in the first 5 grades. Then in the second order, you would learn things that take that and blast it beyond what you probably would normally think. And these concepts get thrown around loosely now, but in this time period when this was being developed, what I'm about to talk about were extremely advanced practices. And to really practice them well, you need the foundation to be able to really take this to the next level. And that's what the Golden Dawn's beauty is they give you a foundation and then take you to the next level. So you're learning things like scrying, using, reflective mirrors, bowls of ink, crystal balls, things like that. But it's deeper than what you'd normally go with. Astral travel, it's a real big thing, but that's kind of where I've come to understand the astral realm is a traveling realm. It's not meant just to hang out and there's not really much there. But you can use it to access everything. So it's really important to know how to work within it and walk within it. You also will deepen your knowledge of alchemy and magic, bringing this conceptual philosophical work and spiritual practices down into the physical, where you start to really understand the power of will, the power of mind, the power of connecting with angels, spirit guides, and the divine. But you're not doing it like I said, everything is amplified in this branch. Then we have what's called the Third Order. And the original Third Order was not in the physical world. This was the secret chiefs. They were the spiritual guides of the order. There has been some branches break off since, and some of the current knowledge has the First Order being 5 grades, the Second Order being 3, and then 3 additional grades, which takes you outside of the 10, being the Third Order. But the original concept of the Third Order was actually non-physical. They were the ones that guided the spiritual community that was being built. William Woodman, was not impressed with the cipher manuscripts. He thought that they were too cryptic for him, so he passed them on to Westcott to see if he could make heads or tails out of them. Westcott thought it was the greatest thing ever, but couldn't quite understand all of the words and could not for the life of him make the rituals work, could not make them functional or understandable. And this is where we introduce MacGregor Mathers. Westcott knew that Mathers had a knack for ciphers and decoding, and he also had a unique ability to understand rituals, which they were both Freemasons, so that kind of makes sense. So Mathers deciphered and then wrote out the grade rituals, the description of the grades, the temple, and the tools. And Woodman kept the peace and settled disputes between the two younger founders, because Westcott and Mathers, it is said, had some hostility towards each other at times. In 1887, Westcott found a countess in Germany, supposedly of the line of the Golden Dawn, the origins of this. And this person was Anna Sprengel. Lore states that her address was encoded into the cipher manuscripts and Mathers deciphered it. It may have been, who really knows, were the cipher manuscripts real? Again, who knows? Anyway, Sprengel claimed to have contact with the secret chiefs and could bestow ranks on those who they deemed worthy. It was from her that the 3 founders received their honorary grades of Adeptus Exemptus, which is around the 7th grade and part of the Inner Order, or the Second Order. Now, there is a little bit of controversy here, and when I say that is there is no justifiable that I have found, or that other people digging into this have found, proof of a woman named Anna Sprengel. Now, that could have been her lodge name, and we would never know. But there is a rumor that they created this connection to give their lodge legitimacy of a long train, just like Rosicrucianism has done, just like a few other of the lodges have done, is they want to extend, be like, we have been here forever. Even if it wasn't, what they developed took on a life of its own, and really truthfully can be life-changing if you choose to go down that path. But that's just some little history there. The original temple was just the outer order of 5 grades: Zealotr, Theocris, Practicus, Philosophus, and Adeptus Minor. And these were the main grades that were written in the original cipher manuscripts. This allowed them to found the Isis Urania temple in 1888. Actually, I love the way they founded their temple in 888, but kind of leading into that eternal number thing. This was a radical lodge for the time in one primary sense. There's a lot of secret lodges popping up and roaming around, especially in Europe during this time. But this one was very unique in one aspect, and the aspect was women were allowed, if not encouraged, to join and to participate in all aspects of the lodge. There were no blocks to joining as far as your gender. Everyone was equal within the lodge. Your only difference was in the grade that you were in. But whether you were a man or woman did not matter to the original founders. And that, for the time, was groundbreaking. This lodge was mainly focused on spiritual advancement and philosophy in its origins. Magic was not far from the future, don't get me wrong, but they started with wanting to understand the philosophy, spiritual practices, understanding yourself. Then you start to understand the divine, and then you start to work. So the outer order was for getting the understanding of the philosophy of the great work. They also worked with meditation. They worked with yoga was added in along the way, but it wasn't part of the founding part of it. But you get these different parts of really starting to understand what's going on in this block right here, but also what goes on in your heart. Then, how do they work together? How do they communicate? Once you figure that out, how do you fit into the grand scheme with the universe? How do you connect into God's source divine energy? This all, and it's done through ritual work, or acts. So it's not like you're going to sit down and be like, today I did the following. You're learning it through the process of developing tools, physical tools that represent spiritual concepts, and these deeper meditational practices. And that's why down below I put the starter pack basically of what you would need to get going on the Golden Dawn, because there's so much there. And these books are gigantic. The stacks, when you stack them all together in physical, it's like 12 inches tall. I mean, they're massive tomes. But the majority of them are pretty easy to read. But my recommendation is to go through chapter by chapter and attempt the practices, especially in some of the like the middle pillar book. Go through that. Learn the middle pillar. Just that alone is fascinating, but we'll get back to the story. But that's kind of where we're going here. In 1890, word was received that Sprengel had passed. Of course, it was Westcott was the one getting this information, so he decided to continue the order so that they would have access to the secret chiefs and the Third Order. Mathers, because of who he was, claimed to have actually made contact with the secret chiefs in the spirit world. And this was after a short time of intensive meditation. Mathers was rather obsessed with magic and the occult anyway, so for him, opening that gateway was kind of the logical next step. And this is how and where they developed what we would call today the Second Order. And this is where we get the Second Order grade rituals, as well as the Second Order temple rooms, because there is a difference, and it's detailed, but that there is a difference. And it is said that this led to the creation of what would be called the Vault of the Adepts. It's basically the controlling force of the order itself. There was only one vault, and to exceed beyond a certain point, you had to visit the vault. And it was a way to bestow access to the secret chiefs. There are other ways around it today, but if you really wanted to get the full experience, that was how you would have to do it in the first place. The Inner Order was finalized and brought into existence in 1892, and this is the realm of the Adepts, so this is the Second Order, and practitioners of the arts. These grades in the Second Order generally are seen as Adeptus Major, Adeptus Exemptus, Magister Templi, Magus, and Ipsissimus. To achieve access to the inner order, you had to prove mastery, not knowledge, of the outer order's rituals, tools, and work, like paperwork, books. And I'll try to say the name for the inner order. It's complicated. It's Latin, so I don't speak good Latin. It is the Ordo Rosae Rubiae et Aurae Crucis. Again, horrible at Latin, but it's the Order of the Red Rose and the Golden Cross. That's the inner order. Other temples, after they developed the second order, started to pop up with various Egyptian names: the Osiris Temple, the Horus Temple, the Amun-Ra Temple, and Mathers independently founded the Ahathor's Temple. And that comes into play later. The Golden Dawn had its heyday in the late 1800s, though, in the start of the 1900s. It was growing quite rapidly, and eventually had over 100 members from every class in society. In the lodge, all are equal within their grade. Some famous names within the lodge were people like Florence Farr, William Butler Yeats, yeah, he was in there, Evelyn Underhill, and of course, the notorious Aleister Crowley. But as power can do, and after Woodman passed, this is kind of what I saw happening when you start researching through some of this stuff, because Westcott and Mathers kind of had a little hostility going on. But it's not the hostility that got Westcott removed. Westcott left the lodge in the late 1890s. Rumor has it that he was secretly within the lodge. Not like his employer didn't know, his most family didn't know, but somehow his employer found out. Rumor has it that he left some lodge documents in the back of a cab, and that made it back to his boss. So, he basically, from what the rumors were going around at that time, he was told he had to cut ties with all magic lodges or lose his job. Well, his job was paying him really good. He was a coroner. So, he just bounced. And this left Mathers in control of the order, which really wouldn't have been a big deal, but Mathers was all about ritual and deciphering and developing things. Leading wasn't quite his forte. But over time, personality conflicts with Mathers in the inner order led to challenges to his authority. Seriously, he helped found the order, but his authority is why they had the lodge. That's the part that baffles me with this. But he wasn't a leader in that aspect, and so the challenge kind of affected him. Like, he was not okay with this, but he didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't like the fact that Mathers was friends with Crowley. That's what started the problems, because Crowley was this infamous bad person, but Crowley was at this time not very old, and his craving for knowledge was way more than the rest of them, and he had advanced through the ranks within the Golden Dawn a lot faster than other people, and so there's some jealousy going on. But being friends with Mathers was a way to weaponize Crowley against Mathers in the public's eye, or in the group's eyes, and that was part of the problem. But that led to the jealousy of the first order, the outer order, not okay with some of the things going on in the second. Well, the second decided that, well, if they're not happy with it, then why can't we access the secret chiefs? They thought they had a right to this just because they were in the second order. You had to achieve a certain level of adepthood, knowing these skills, knowing these abilities, and being able to control yourself as you pass through so that your ego's not in the way. And I'm not kidding with that, because that's the reason the astral plane can be iffy. But that's what you were being taught, was how to control those parts of you so that you could get honest information. The secret chiefs were not there for everybody, especially at this time. And they didn't like having this information being filtered through Mathers. Well, Mathers was the highest adept at that time. I can't remember if I've ever seen what his official title was, but it was above everyone else. No one had achieved beyond what he had achieved yet. So you have to have that training. It's not simple as, I meditated for 30 minutes today. Okay. But that's not what you're doing when you're dealing with the secret chiefs. It was an order of like a secret brotherhood, but it was spiritual, and you had to go to them to gain this knowledge. And that's where scrying and astral projection come into play. But if you're not strong in those, who knows what you're going to end up with? And that's the risk with some of this stuff, is the world's not all light, love, and bubbles. There's some other stuff out there, and that's why having the foundation before you start launching yourself out into the space is good, so you know how to discern. And that's, like I said, what you're being taught in the Golden Dawn in a lot of ways. Not all of it. You're going to learn a lot by, tripping and falling, but that's what the point of the lodge was to help you figure this stuff out. This conflict, though, led to the order beginning to fracture. The London Temple, and this was one of the primary ways that they were going to weaponize Crowley, the London Temple refused to acknowledge Crowley into the Inner Order. Even though he passed all the ritual grade tests, he knew the knowledge better than they did in a lot of ways, and I'm not kidding. I've read several reports of people who knew Crowley at that time in that lodge, and they were baffled by how he had these things down. He could recite them backwards if he needed to. That's how good of a memory he had with these rituals. And Mathers pushed the issue, and that's when a formal investigation was instigated, because Mathers pushed him into the Second Order, and basically filed the official paperwork for his induction into the Second Order. The leaders in the lodge in London, which is the first lodge, went rogue and refused to acknowledge Mathers' order to induct him into this Inner Order. And they voted to remove Mathers from the order altogether because of this. They were the original lodge. That did not mean they have the authority to take him out like this. He was the lodge. He was the reason the lodge existed during this time. Interesting side note. W.B. Yeats would resign shortly after publishing a short pamphlet on the order, and it was all during the time of this big conflict, because he thought that what was happening was far from the spiritual practices of the order. And when the London one went rogue, he was like, I'm out, I can't do this, you guys aren't even sticking to your own principles. Ego got in the way because they didn't know how to access properly. Just saying. By 1913, it is said that there were only 23 members in the Inner Order that were still loyal to the original order, which is Mathers 1. The official order under Mathers still existed at this time, and eventually the lodges under Mathers would be renamed the Alpha et Omega to kind of distance themselves from the chaos that was melting down in the other Golden Dawn temples. This renaming doesn't have an exact set date. It was between the years of 1901 and 1913. I was trying to pin it down for a date, and it was all over the place. So it was in that decade or so. This is around the time, though, that the order spread to the United States. Again, numbers are mixed. Some say it was 1899, some say it was 1905. In the late turn of the century, the order had arrived in America. By 1914, there were 3 temples within the United States themselves. A small branch of the order branched off at this time, and that was called the Stella Matutina. But it was still loyal to the main order and Mathers, and they followed those rituals to a T. I couldn't quite figure out what happened, why they separated off, or it was just a hiving that they did, and they just wanted to name their lodge something different, but that's what happened. Unfortunately, it wasn't very long until all but 2 Stella temples and no Golden Dawn temples at all were active by the 30s. The 2 Stella temples that were still active were in Bristol and Havelock, North New Zealand. And both of these lodges, over the course of the next little while, would eventually close in the 1970s. But all is not lost, because if it wasn't for the work of Israel Regardie, someone that I hold in exceptionally high regard because of what he did, the majority of what we know about the Golden Dawn would have been lost entirely. He broke his vow of secrecy, which was something you didn't want to do, but he could see the writing on the wall and knew that if this was not made public, we would lose it. And he valued this so much that he risked a lot, really, for that time to do this. He wrote the tome, this chonker right here, of the Golden Dawn, in 4 books. This is the compiled version. It's all in one set. And this is what has continued the order, continued the knowledge, and helped establish what we know today as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There's a lot of branches out there. Again, link in the description is going to the official main one connecting back to Mathers. And as I talked about in the Israel Regardie episode, Sheik and Tabitha Cicero are the current holders of the main line of spirituality through this text, through the order. They worked with Regardie in the later years of his life, and they also worked out some of the information in the books. You'll notice a lot of them are edited or annotated by Sheik and Tabitha, and they fleshed out the works. They actually were able to gain access to Regardie's journals, and that's where a lot of this extra knowledge came in. They added their own flares, and you can tell the difference in writing style, but they did it to help bring the Golden Dawn into the modern world, and they still are out there today doing it. And I even found, and I haven't read it yet, Cicero's wrote a book called Self-Initiation into the Golden Dawn Tradition. This is it's not a huge book, it's probably 200 pages, but it's so that you can, at home, start the process of understanding this. This gives you all the foundational work, practices, meditation, exercises to really jump from that book into the main Golden Dawn book and be able to process it quite well, actually. The Tree of Life gives you an amazing overview of what the Kabbalah is, different branches of magic in the inner order, but it's just kind of a good reference book, but it's good to know the knowledge. The Middle Pillar teaches you about the Kabbalah and how to use it as an energy generating force within your body, and the Garden of Pomegranates takes you on a journey through your life, from your foundation in Malkuth to your spiritual ascension in Kether. It's about showing you how, where, and how it will build. They also tie it into the tarot so that you can use that as focal points and exercises to help you understand the Tree of Life through your body, as well as deepening your knowledge of spirituality. There are a few variations of the grades, but from the order in Israel, but the order of them from Israel is the correct grade order. And no, I have seen this popping up a lot lately, and it's driving me batty. I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways. This is one of them. There are only 10 grades, 11 if you count Neophyte, which is basically, I don't know what I'm looking at, what is it I'm trying to learn. So, and that one's, you don't learn a lot with that. It's more of just an introduction to what you could access. But again, 10 primary grades, 11 if you count the Neophyte, which is below the Zealoter. It's not really an initiation for that one that I've ever seen, but moving on. There are groups out there and self-described Golden Dawn leaders who claim to have achieved level 33. Okay, that's a branch of the Masons, Scottish Free Rite Masonry. The true Golden Dawn had 10 degrees, 10 grades. And trust me, because I have practiced a lot of this, and if I was to say I had a title, I would be getting ready to go into the inner order, but it's not because of consistent. I'm all over the place with my studies, but trust me when I say, if you go through these rituals, you learn the lessons and really put your heart and mind into the practice of the skills you learn. You will discover more about yourself, the world we live in, the spirit world and God Source Divine Energy's connection to us than you would ever learn from some elaborate title. Like, I have achieved blah, blah, blah. Good for you. Prove it. Most people can't. And that's what Mathers was having such a problem with back in the early 1900s. They were so obsessed with, I have achieved a title, but you didn't do the work. The title is the outward reflection of the inner transformation. That's why in those 10 grades, Ipsissimus is almost impossible to achieve. Why? Because that's setting you up to literally step into the secret order, the third order, the secret chiefs. You have to have so much knowledge and mastery of Kabbalah, of alchemy, of tarot, of scrying, of astral projection, magic in general, to be able to access that it's not something every person's going to achieve, and that's fine. Your spiritual journey may not be taking you down that path. But to claim for ego purposes, I have level 33. What? Prove it. Your ego's telling me you haven't achieved crap. Sorry, but that's true. That's how I feel. So this is stuff to me that is important if you're going to want to go down the journey of the Golden Dawn. We went through the founders. This is the basics of what you're going to learn if you decide to go in this section, which is a lot of what today we would call woo-woo, magical, mystical, whatever. But the purpose behind it is spiritual transformation, spiritual understanding. It's not just about waving a magic wand and casting a spell. It's about going inside and figuring out who you are as a person, who you are as a spiritual being, how you fit into the grand scheme of the universe, how you have been blessed with, I love the term to use this, spiritual technology that allows you to actually shift what's going on around you. Perspective is huge, but being able to control that perspective so that you can grow spiritually and uplift others. Because if you're doing this work on yourself, the people around you are going to be affected as well. So, I won't get into that. If you would like more information, I've linked the official website down below, as I said before, and I have the list of what I consider the foundational books, like the starter's kit of the Golden Dawn. And if you want to start a study or practice within the Golden Dawn and find a lodge that's close to you, because there are a lot of them out there now, not massive amounts, but fair amount, you can check the official website. They have a spot in there to find a lodge. You can also study on your own. That's the reason I put the self-initiation book at the top of the list, so that you can get that one, kind of figure out, is this something I really want to go into? And then from there, like I said, the Tree of Life and the Golden Dawn are the primary two that you're going to want to research and go through. If you decide to really take it deeper, the Middle Pillar and the Garden of Pomegranates are without value. They're not without value. They're valueless. They're so worth the information that's in them. They're priceless. That's the word I was looking for. Because you can't put a price on the knowledge that has been passed down like that. And it's a lot, and it's fascinating. And with practice and dedication, you can learn a lot about the universe, the great work, about yourself, and about where you stand in the world. So, with that, I will hop off here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Let me know your thoughts on this video, if the Golden Dawn's something that you've had experience with before, or if this is rather new to you. Let me know in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, enjoyed it, something. And if you're new, hit the subscribe button just so that you can see what else I bring forward later. But for this one, this is, like I said, basics, a little bit of timeline, and kind of the concept of what you can learn through the Golden Dawn. And I hope it helped. I will talk to you guys later.